Writer's block doesn't exist. It's all bullshit. See, writing well is hard. It doesn't sound hard, it sounds like the easiest thing in the world. We just make up stories and write them down. What could be easier than that? So, to cross the divide of what looks very easy from the outside, but is in fact very difficult from the inside, we all come up with this terminology to mystify it, to make it seem more complex and mysterious in an effort to convey how difficult it really is. We speak of things like muses and flow and inspiration, but again, it's all bullshit. The reality of writing is not one of poetic divine inspiration, but of professional dedication, practice, and endless repetition. If you want to be a good musician, you pick up an instrument every day and keep plucking notes until it sounds bearable. You want to make swords? You show up at the forge, rain or shine, and make crappy sword after crappy sword until one turns out good. Same thing with writing. No muses, no divine touch. So then, what are we talking about when we say things like writer's block? If that's the fancy, poetic way to describe it, what do we really mean? We mean we're stuck. Sounds a lot less poetic that way, huh? Far more mundane, like having trouble with a crossword puzzle. That's not actually a bad analogy. See, writing is simply problem solving. We invent narrative problems for our characters, and then we find dramatic solutions to those problems. But sometimes our problem-making brain is several steps ahead of our problem-solving brain. So we get tripped up. We get stuck. Writing is a creative exercise, and like all acts of creation, be it a painting or making a baby, it's not entirely logical. There's no X-ray to determine if a story is working correctly or not. If you blow a transmission, and I have, you can look at it and go, wow, that's a blown transmission. When you break a bone, and I have, you can look at a bone scan and go, wow, that bone sure is broken. For the record, those did not happen in the same incident. So when we're experiencing writer's block, we're subconsciously detecting something wrong with our story. Some unknown flaw that needs resolving. But because we don't have a diagnostic test to run, we waver. We hem and haw trying to figure out what the problem might be, and we get stuck. It's like being sick, but not knowing with what, or how your car starts to pull a little funny right before you blow a tire. You know something's wrong, so you slow down, get out, have a look around, but don't actually know what the problem is. Writer's block isn't some muse abandoning you, it's the narrative equivalent of a check engine light or a flashing caution ahead sign. Let's talk some examples. In a project that was so long ago, I don't actually remember which one it was, I was having trouble with a scene, and by trouble, I mean I was stuck on it for several days. So far, so normal, except that this scene was almost entirely dialogue. See, dialogue has always come easily to me. I have a lot of fun world building, plots aren't too difficult, and coming up with interesting characters downright kicks my ass, but dialogue, that was always the easy part. So I was quite flummoxed, both in that I was stuck and how I was stuck. I just kept shaking my head and thinking, why can't I write this dialogue? I can always write dialogue. So I ran through some diagnostic checks. There was dramatic tension in the scene, it was necessary to the plot. What was going on? I was stuck. I had writer's block. And then I figured it out. The either very clever or very experienced writers among you will have figured it out too, based just on what I've told you about the situation so far. I didn't know my characters for shit. When I make characters, I tend to start with broad, one-dimensional outlines and build additional interesting layers on top of them over time. It usually takes several drafts for my characters to start feeling like people instead of soggy cardboard. In this scene, I had the plot and the world building and all of that crap figured out. But because I didn't know who my characters were, I didn't know what they would say. Once I figured out the problem, the block, as it were, was broken. The check engine light came off. I was able to spend time fleshing out the characters, fix the problem, and get back to work. It would have been easy for me to simply write it off as writer's block, as being uninspired. But in my experience, there is always a reason behind being uninspired. The second example was more recent, as in like a few days ago. Yeah, it turns out it doesn't matter how long you write for or how good you get, you're still going to get stuck. It's just a fact of life. I'm working on a new novel, surprise, surprise, and was having trouble getting started. I kept opening a blank document, getting more and more frustrated by it, and then walking away without having gotten anything done. This is unusual for me as my ideas tend to bubble and build in my mind until I have to write them down. It's the only way to get them out of my head. Normally, when I sit down to start on a new project, I'm so excited I can't help myself. So why was I blocked? It's because this project was different. It's one I already wrote a long time ago, not as a novel, but as a screenplay. I got precisely one agent to give me feedback on it, and then never did anything with it again. That meant I had all the plot, characters, and world building figured out. I just needed to write the bugging thing. So what was tripping me up? My voice. I wrote the previous thing as a screenplay, which has far greater tolerances for mechanical writing. As a novel, it needed a much stronger voice, one I'm not accustomed to. Normally, when writing genre fiction, I eschew flowery prose. I let the world be interesting and keep the language simple. I don't need purple prose to make casting spells and killing monsters cool. It's exciting in and of itself. But this new/old project didn't have any of that. It's almost entirely limited to people talking in rooms. And while I can make that dramatically interesting with plain words, it's a lot harder to make tonally interesting. So how did I solve it? Again, the key thing was identifying the problem. It took me a good 2 days to diagnose what was wrong and another day or two to fix it. Identifying the problem was only half the battle. To actually fix it, I sat in my office and listened to a crap ton of tonally relevant albums. At the end of my books, I list what music I listened to when writing the book. And there's good reason for that, as we talked about in the Steal Like a Writer video. Those soundtracks, albums, whatever, help me to steep in the mood, to slip into the genre as if stepping out onto the street in my favorite jacket. Once I had the feel for the world, I was able to find what I wanted my voice to sound like within it. Both of these examples, while anecdotal, give you all the secrets you need to getting around writer's block. There is no one method for getting past a break in your story. There are no 5 secret tips to beating writer's block, any more than there are 5 simple things your mechanic doesn't want you to know about. There can be 1,000,001 things wrong with your car. It's why the check engine light doesn't tell you exactly what it is. It can't. Instead, it's a warning light telling you to pull over to the side of the road or consult a mechanic to figure out why your fancy car doesn't drive like it used to. Writer's block is our check engine light. It's our mechanic, our doctor, whatever, saying, hey, you might want to get that looked at. Just like with our cars or with our health, you have to pull over to the side of the road, pop the hood, and give it a good once-over. Is the scene we're writing interesting, not just to the story, but to itself, in the same way that we make sure there's gas in the tank? Are the characters we've hinged the story on dynamic enough to carry us through the plot, in the same way that we need to make sure there's air in the tires? Is the engine clunking or the transmission slipping in the same way that our plots can get tripped up or disjointed? Or is everything running smoothly? Can we get back on the narrative highway? There's one last thing to talk about before we wrap up, and that's burnout. Now, burnout is a topic that deserves its own video. I just want to touch on it briefly here, as the problems can often be confused or intertwined. Burnout is not writer's block, but can often feel like it, leading you to be disenfranchised with your work or not know what to do next. When I'm having creative burnout, I typically solve it by binging a metric crap ton of media. Usually movies, but anything will do. Pick your poison of choice, be it video games, comic books, or anime. It'll get the creative juices going. I'll let you make your own anime joke there. If you can't tell the difference between writer's block and burnout, take a month off watch a bunch of movies, and see if it goes away. If it does, it was burnout. If it doesn't, your story has some flaw you don't want to face. Pop open the hood, get out the engine grease, and see what's going on with it. So to summarize, writer's block is a bullshit excuse we tell ourselves. In reality, we're just stuck and don't want to face the problems in our own story. In order to fix those problems, we need to fall back on the fundamentals, break everything down to its constituent parts, and give it a thorough examination. Only once we have identified and diagnosed the actual problem can we set about fixing it. Writer's block is nothing to be feared. It's a part of the business, and being a professional means coming up with ways to deal with it. I'm Michael Aguero. Thanks for watching. If you want to check out a story I didn't get stuck on, you can pick up my latest book, Thrice Dead Witch. It's a story about a remote village deep in a southern forest. Tales of children gone missing and deformed infants have the local population and the ruling crown casting accusations of curses at one another. An expedition is sent in to find the truth and bring the monster responsible to justice. If you want to support the channel, you can pick it up on Amazon Kindle or Google Play. Every little bit helps. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.